Hi, it's really great to be here, everyone. Hello, chat. Hello, world. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I'm Dan. You don't need to bother trying to pronounce my last name, but I'm really excited to chat about community, and we're going to get into it. But for all of you CS leaders out there who are talking about building a customer community and not having it be ruined by marketing, I'm afraid that I'm going to teach you how to ruin your community with marketing. Just kidding. But that is one of the things we're going to talk about. Like for communities, what do you use them for? Are they used for marketing? Are they used for retention, adoption, all of the above? So if you're in the chat right now, I'd love to hear as we get started, like, why are you, one, at this summit now? What do you hope to learn? And two, how do you hope to leverage community for your company? So it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm going to share my screen and let the chat rock off. And I hope everyone's having an amazing day. Okay, screen sharing, slideshow mode. So I'm loading the screen. This is me, all pictures taken the last week. Not really what you're here to see, but the one in the middle, I dug a hole in the ground and cooked food, buried it. So that makes me qualified to talk about community. But a little bit about my background. I started off doing political work. Then I joined this community, Modern Sales Pros, as their first employee. Grew that community from 1,000 to 15,000 members and monetized it. That was tied to the software company Atrium. More political work. Then I joined Chili Piper as a senior community manager. About 2 years later, I was the VP of community and content there. And about 80% of all of our acquisition was sourced through word of mouth and community initiatives. After that, I joined Apollo, where I was the VP of community there. During that time, we raised $100 million, 1.6 billion valuation. When I joined, word of mouth was about 15% of acquisition. When I left, it was about 76. Currently, I'm working for the Harris Walls campaign, doing a couple things in stealth, but actually, I'll be coming back to a couple really familiar companies that I've worked with in the past as a kind of a fractional VP of community soon. So hopefully we can talk about some stuff. So what I want to discuss is what is community marketing, and then I want to discuss cross-community evangelism and the customer relationship. I'm going to hop back to the chat real quick to see if we got anything here. And we can kind of get started really soon. Right now. Okay, cool. So what is community marketing? Before that, I want to talk about like how community marketing has transformed some brands. So we're going to talk a lot about the definition of what is community and what is community marketing, because it means so many different things to so many different people. But one thing I know is that it works, right? So if you look at these three brands here, the three at the top are companies that I've worked at. And the three at the bottom are companies that everybody knows. And I believe it's because all of these companies have deployed a community marketing strategy. Well, like, what is community marketing? First, let's define community. So for me, community is a space, either physical or digital, where people who aren't explicitly paid to do so freely exchange knowledge and information. Examples of this would be like Slack groups, in-person meetups, like the comment section of social media, Facebook groups. Even at larger companies, like let's say there's a 10,000 person company and there's a group of people who meet each week to discuss how they can optimize software across the org. That's a community. What I think might not be a community are some things that appear to be communities. You know, for example, your message board that is supposed to have a place where customers talk to each other, but it's just a place where people report bugs or they ask questions and an employee replies. Like, community exists at the intersection of real authentic engagement, not someone asking questions and then having someone on staff reply. Okay, now let's discuss community marketing, which is kind of my niche. And basically, community marketing is the effort to place your customers as the primary distribution point for your brand. Traditional marketing, it's like, let's run ads to our future customers, to our prospects. Let's get our message in front of them. But what's actually happening here is you message through them. And I'll talk about this visually a little bit later. But community marketing is identifying the spaces of influence and deploying the customer to those spaces. So we'll talk about it in a second. All right, next slide. So if you're watching now, I'm going to give you kind of a breakdown on how to kind of do community marketing. And the first two steps are to kind of understand where you need to drop some influence. I'm going to go back and check on the chat. If anyone has questions, I can weave all this stuff throughout. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Okay, cool. So if I were thinking about building community, the very first thing I would think about is, where do I need to build community, right? Because it's one thing to say, oh, let's buoy the customer voice, but is it in a relevant space? And that's why if you use this QR code, it'll bring you to a LinkedIn post that I made a while back. Shameless ask. You can follow me on LinkedIn now. I have the best LinkedIn URL. It's linkedin.com/greatmarketing. So hopefully this presentation stands up to that. But anyway, the idea of an influence map is that you want to understand what's currently influencing your customers. So if I were to come into an org, this is the very first thing I would do. I would talk to close won, close lost customers that might be my future ICP, but might not be now. And I'd ask them, what influences you? What podcasts do you listen to? What events are you attending? What blogs do you read? Who do you respect the most on social media? What in-person events are you attending? What like newspaper do you read? Things like that. And then basically from understanding what is currently influencing your customer, you can build this map. And I'll show you an example of it in a future slide. But from this map, you can understand the spaces that you need to deploy the customer voice. Because often what influences the customer isn't that straightforward. And almost never is it, well, I wait for ads in my feed and then I click on them. Like, the buying decision is so complex now, so varied, so many different things go into it. And it's important to understand like just what is influencing your customer, and then you can deploy the customer voice to those spaces. But like, how do you deploy that customer voice, right? Like, easier said than done. And I think that sits at the intersection of social media and customer marketing. And we'll get into that in a second. So first, here's an example of an influence map. It's not like a full influence map. This is just to focus on the B2B communities that exist in Slack and on different kind of community platform forums. But you see here, like a traditional marketing approach, let's say I wanted to sponsor or have an influence in the community pavilion. I love Pavilion, by the way. It's a great community. But the traditional approach would be to say, let's give Pavilion money. Let's give them money, and then we will sponsor a group in their Slack or whatever. By the way, you should give Pavilion money. I've done it myself. It was amazing. But I believe there's a secondary aspect of marketing that plays so heavily into the influence map. And it's like, rather than owning a Slack group in Pavilion, I'd much rather have 5 or 6 really happy customers that are active in that community. And they know when my solution comes up, when people discuss Apollo or Chili Piper or whatever, those customers are there advocating for us. So what I've done is I've found these communities, and then I attempted to deploy the customer voice to those communities. That's that black dot in the middle there. Because what's more powerful than you waving your own flag in these communities is authentic customers doing it for you. We're going to talk about how to do that, and I think it's going to be really fun. Carly's asking, what is Pavilion? So Pavilion is a Slack group for different go-to-market executives run by Sam Jacobs. It's amazing. And in it, there are a lot of conversations, because one of the real things about community is that oftentimes, particularly if you're in a RevOps role or a role that might have less people, you're the only person who has that experience at your company. So it's really helpful to have other people to talk to, like in Pavilion. Okay, next slide. I'm getting some feedback right now also through the mic, so I'm trying to see what's going on there. Okay. So quick deep dive into. Hi, I'm back on stage. Technology is great until it's not, especially when I'm the user. So basically, I'm going to do a quick deep dive into LinkedIn for 2 seconds, because one of the most important things when you're building kind of community is to understand where people are already hanging out. And in the B2B space, a lot of times it's going to be on LinkedIn. So like, you can think of LinkedIn and these other spaces where your customers are hanging out is almost like your top of funnel, not for customers, but for finding advocates in advocacy. One of the first things I did when I joined Apollo was I started replying to everyone who made a positive mention of Apollo anywhere. And that started to build a relationship. And then that relationship is something you can deploy across other spaces. So when you're thinking about deploying the customer relationship and building a community marketing strategy, one of the first things I would suggest is, like, you've built your paths within your marketing funnel, within your CS funnel, to bring a customer from onboarded to happy to that aha moment to healthy customer, to renewal to expansion. But what paths are you building to bring them from customer to advocate to user generated content? There's a really simple way you can do this. Feature customers on your social more, create forums asking them what stories they want to share. And that's like the easiest way to get customers involved. A couple other really quick things on LinkedIn that'll just make this really simple is like LinkedIn. Like if you're going to build a community, you need to speak with your customers, not at them. So what I would suggest to folks is when you're out there building your presence, you're trying to gather customers, you're trying to praise customers in public. You want to vary the content pillars that you have and basically hone in on different types of content until you find super customer centric content where the customer is the champion. Then you want to vary that by, whether it's video, whether it's long form text, short form text, photos of customers, things like that. But the idea isn't like, let's say you want to post every day. You don't need to make 365 posts. You just need to understand 5 or 6 different content pillars and then filter through them. And those content pillars should be customer centric if you're doing it correctly. Cool. So I answered the pavilion question. Let's go to the next slide. So now we know that the first thing we need to do to bring about a community strategy and enable this kind of cross-community evangelism is to understand what's influencing our customers and then kind of build a baseline social presence so that we look good. So people want to interact with us. They want, they think it's fun. They think you're cool. The next thing you want to do, and this is just like a total game changer, is you want to increase the distribution points for your brand. A lot of times when I talk to marketers and I join companies, they might have a few distribution points for our brand. Oh, we want to announce this new feature. Cool. How are you going to do that? Well, our CEO posts to LinkedIn sometimes. We have paid ads. We have our company page and we have a newsletter. That's 4 distribution points. Like that is not that much. Like what if you had 100 distribution points? What if you had 500? And that's part of the power of community-led growth and community marketing. You look on the left side of this graph here, you can see that the types of distribution points when you're employing a community strategy are broken into 3 buckets. The first, customer evangelism. We'll get into that in a second, but that could be, any fixed community that you have. Maybe you have a Slack group. It could be a customer advisory board. It could be people who just like you on social media. It could be people who get a referral bonus when they talk about you, so they want to talk about you online. The second bucket is community partners. This could be partner communities. It could be your integration partners. It could be paid influencers that you're working with. And the third bucket here is employee evangelism. That's executives and employees. I believe there's so much potential for all of these programs. You literally could hire a person to manage all 3 of these programs and they'd have infinite work to do. But think about it this way. In your current marketing strategy, you're distributing your content through like 3, 4, 5 different plans. What if all of your executives join for every single big announcement and then their employees see that their boss is doing it? It creates this cultural effect that kind of that pushes the narrative on. So I've done this at companies like Chili Piper and Apollo, where when I joined, we were reaching organically on social. At Chili Piper, it was like 4,000 people a month. When we left, it was 1 to 2 million organically every month. And at Apollo as well, it was about 30,000 organic a month. Then by the end of it, some months we're reaching 5 million people. We're reaching 1 million on the company channel organically. We're reaching 1 million through employee evangelism, executive evangelism. We're reaching 1 million. Organic user generated content. We're reaching 1 million all in 1 month. And like, if you stack this up on top of itself, it's going to be really difficult for people to compete with you.